Welcome back to the latest Built in Ohio podcast, where we're talking with tech leaders from across the state, learning what's happening from Cleveland, in this case, all the way down to Cincinnati and everywhere in between. And today we don't have one, we actually have two guests for you. So we'll kind of do the intros a little bit different. So then that way, especially for those just listening on audio, although this is going on YouTube as well, you'll know voices. And obviously, for those that listen, I'm Chris Berry, and I'm the host of Built in Ohio. But as I mentioned, we have two guests today. And so they're going to share a little bit about the work they're doing. And also for our upcoming Ohio Tech Summit this Saturday, April 23rd in Cleveland, we're lucky that both these companies, Pandata and H2O AI, are the co-presenting sponsors. And so we're grateful for them, their partnership. We're really excited. We just announced recently that tickets are sold out. And so I'm looking forward to diving in with both of these leaders today and learning a bit more about their work, what they're doing, and some of the opportunities that we're going to see for Ohio. And so we're going to start now with kind of the very brief introduction. So first up is Al-Dhubaib. He's the CEO of Pandata, and Pandata is an award-winning firm that empowers organizations to use artificial intelligence competitively. They use data science thought leaders and help organizations solve and simplify complex business challenges. And they pride themselves on delivering solutions that are approachable and ethical. And so, Cal, welcome. If you wouldn't mind a little bit more, kind of your own bio and your own words, so that way listeners can get to know you and your voice a bit.
For sure. Chris, thanks for having me. So hi, folks. Glad to be here. I started Pandata after hearing a phrase over and over again. We have data and we don't know what to do with it. And I still hear variations of that today. But in a nutshell, Pandata helps organizations really tap into data and all of what that means. That used to be tables and spreadsheets, and today sometimes that means documents, images, videos, and audio feeds. And we help them build really meaningful applications that help automate and augment processes. And we're really focused on, especially as AI has grown in its impact, building solutions that you can audit, building solutions that are fair, and that reduce the risk of bias, and that really focus on putting humans first.
Awesome. And as I read off the last part, Cal, of what, Pandata, approachable, ethical, and some of the things, the sentiments you shared, I'm sure we'll dig in a bit more there in a second. But next, we want to welcome Matt. He's a strategic account executive at H2O AI, and they're the leading AI cloud company on a mission to democratize AI for everyone. Customers use the H2O AI Hybrid Cloud platform to rapidly make, operate, and innovate to solve complex business problems and accelerate the discovery of new ideas. So, Matt, H2O AI, that global company, probably doing work all over the place, but you are also based in Ohio. So welcome and thanks for being here.
I am a lifetime Ohioan, Cleveland East Sider all my life. But it's great to be a part of today's discussion and working with Cal and just the Cleveland community here and what we're trying to do. I think you really encapsulated H2O AI and what we're doing. But I think just to underscore kind of this movement that we're on, really I feel like we're the tip of the spear of this idea of democratizing artificial intelligence to make it easier, faster, more cost effective. But I think what is most important is making it much more approachable to the masses, so that AI can power daily decision making and really be part of the the fabric of any company's DNA and how they compete, how they serve their customers, and really push the envelope of innovation. And as you said, I lead our strategic accounts group through the Rust Belt. Taking a special focus with the partnership that we have with Pandata and what we're doing here in Ohio. So thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And I'd love to kind of, for both of you, and Cal, I'll start with you, of, talking artificial intelligence. Seems like you both are operating obviously closely in similar spaces, but could you talk, maybe kind of give an example or two of, the type of work you do, the type of businesses, because there's, tech means so much, across the board, and there's just a ton to it. And so we really kind of like to, peek behind the curtain of the type of companies you're working with, the type of projects you're working on, to give our listeners kind of a bit deeper.
Absolutely. So in the past, the world of data science and building competitive applications with machine learning and AI used to be the exclusive domain of large corporations. And so, in the early days of Pandata, our clients included folks like Parker Hannifin, First Energy, the Cleveland Clinic, university hospitals, and we still do a lot of great work with these companies. And we're typically focusing on process automation where there's maybe protected data that's hard to work with, maybe it's qualitative, survey responses, documents, etc. And we're focused on very, very specific business applications. Now, what's really interesting, and we can dive a little bit more into this later, but our partnership with H2O and what I love about it, one, the mission is democratizing AI for all. In the last 3 years, what we've seen is the barriers to building these AI systems have dramatically decreased, thanks to tools like H2O. Whereas in the past, you used to have teams of data scientists trying to tidy data, clean data up, grab it out of these really hard to difficult with sources. And you only get to spend a fraction of your time actually building the applications. Today, that picture looks a little bit different, where we can spend a little bit more time doing things like prototyping models to maybe predict or guess what somebody's trying to say based on documents, or create natural looking summaries of a large amount of content. And so tools like H2O really do help accelerate that process. And so these days, in addition to the enterprise clients we're working with, we started to do quite a bit of work with startups and SMB-sized companies. And it's really exciting getting to bring the same competitive advantages of AI that the big players use.
That's fantastic. Matt, how about you and H2O?
Say the question again, Chris.
Yeah, so just kind of a going a bit deeper on the type of projects, the type of companies you all are working with, and being a big, massive company. I'm sure there's a ton of examples, but to kind of give listeners a bit more on the type, and maybe there's a new customer out there that's listening.
Sure. No, I think H2O plays across the spectrum of industries. I think that we found a really healthy niche but domain expertise in the world of finance, healthcare, insurance. If you look at some of our customers that we work with, I mean, they really run the gamut of kind of the biggest and top players in those industries. And I think the types of use cases as industry spans the gamut. In finance, we're doing a lot with fraud, transactional fraud, risk mitigation, customer profiling, segmentation, 360, and driving actions like offer design, and how we can coach the human on the other end of that phone through AI to better serve this customer. And as Cal said, really introducing an accelerant to the business processes and the solutions that we're trying to put in the hands, not just solely focus on the front end of the life cycle and the modeling process. To Cal's point, where we can absolutely help to be an accelerant in what's going on there, but really focused on not just the models, but what are they driving, right? How's this impacting the company? How are we introducing efficiencies? How are we driving, again, competitive advantage and really pushing the envelope forward for the organization.
Yeah. And so now I'd love to kind of back it up a bit now that we have a good snapshot of what both your companies do. And Cal, I'll start with you because you have a fascinating background, and we've had the opportunity to work together for, probably a couple of years now. And I always love your story, and I won't kind of, ruin it for you as you share it, but just how you discovered some of these opportunities and, things like AI and, artificial intelligence, some of these other emerging technologies, they're newer, and, it's not really all that common to have been in this space 5, 10, 15 years ago, but you sent some opportunities and kind of had some interesting points in your career and education that have led to what you're building now today with Pandata.
So it's really funny now that I'm reflecting. I'm getting closer to 10 years in the industry, and I guess that makes me a senior in this domain.
You're the OG.
Back in 2012, 2013, I was working in healthcare research. And so I was dealing with data, and data is where this all starts, right? Asking questions like what keeps the population healthy. I was working in healthcare research, specifically population health. And I found myself really, really enamored with the power that you can tap into building these kinds of models to predict the future. But something I kept hearing was a lot of organizations saying, again, we have data, we don't know what to do with it. And there's a lot of nuances. There's a lot of prep work that goes into getting data ready to use for a purpose, right? There's data that's messy, it's inconsistent. Humans are generating data at the end of the day. It's our observations, it's our behaviors, and humans are inconsistent at best. So it was just a really interesting field to grow into. And at the time, Case was starting to talk about introducing a data science program. And of course, after a 7-year career at the undergraduate level, the last thing my parents wanted to hear was, I'm going to change my major one more time. And as it turns out, that was maybe one of the best career decisions I ever made. I ended up becoming the first data science graduate out of Case. I helped prototype what the data science education at the undergraduate level would look like. I had a background in mathematics, biology, and also systems engineering. And at the time, I couldn't really see the pattern as I was building up to it. But when this field of data science clicked for me, that's how I got my start. And back in 2016, when I started Pandata, there were fewer than 150 data scientists in all of Northeast Ohio. We have a lot of major enterprises and corporations here. If we want to be able to tap into the advantage of data scientists, the teams that help build these competitive machine learning and AI solutions, we need to solve our talent pipeline here. And, even 5 years from that, it's grown. We're getting closer to 1,000, but there's still not nearly enough. And it's been really just an incredible journey watching the field evolve and the community of data scientists coalesce here.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'd be curious, Cal, as a bit of a follow-up on, your perspective of, you said 150 when you were getting started, has that grown? And I'm sure, like across all tech disciplines, there's just not enough talent, and, all these companies are growing and expanding. And if you talk to any business, big or small, talent is probably the number one challenge.
Absolutely.
But how has Ohio, Northeastern Ohio, in that, 10 years or so that you've been in this space kind of grown? Where are you kind of seeing these opportunities that we're, kind of seizing? And, what do you think we kind of need to do to take that next step to continue building out this hub for us?
Great question. So let me just profile that 150. Of those, about a third of them worked for one of 3 companies: IBM, Cleveland Clinic, Progressive. So that distribution still kind of holds true today, right? There's this big concentration in larger enterprises. The number today is inching closer to 1,000. Last time I checked was about 6 months ago, and I saw 700 to 800. I'm looking at titles like data scientist, data engineer. I'm not really looking at the analyst. But if you just look for those, that's kind of, so we've kind of grown. We've almost 10x'd in 10 years. I don't think that's fast enough growth. But the concentration is still very, very imbalanced. So companies that could otherwise take advantage of this talent isn't able to, especially here. So how do we solve that? There's 2 things. We're all familiar now with digital literacy, right? It became the definitive skill in the 2000s. If you couldn't work with spreadsheets, documents, Excel, etc., you were going to fall behind in the workplace. The 2010s was all about data literacy. So what does data quality look like? How do I make visualizations? How do I use data to make business decisions? The 2020s, I think that it's going to be all about AI literacy. So this means understanding what intelligent automation really looks like, what goes into building models, how do models fail, how does data become a part of intelligence? And these are skills that even if you don't have data scientists on your team, that you can get your team up to speed in. And it makes working with platforms and tools like H2O a lot easier. And you can kind of really tap into the power of these platforms when you understand some of the assumptions that go under the hood.
If I could maybe jump in there, I think
Please.
that your perspective is spot on, right? I spent the last probably 12, 13 years of my career in the world of BI, advanced analytics, and when I joined H2O was really steering my career into this more prescriptive, predictive world that's driven by artificial intelligence and machine learning. But the AI literacy is really, I think, an important, and even to dovetail to your previous comment, the data literacy is absolutely paramount to a successful initiative, right? And I feel like our job, and the partnership that we have, with Pandata, our job is to really help shepherd, these clients that we work with on that journey, because, in some cases, we're talking about maybe a 1 or 2 man, data science team that, needs to produce, needs to scale. And that's where, tools like H2O, consulting agencies like Pandata, I mean, really, can help accelerate and put together really profound solutions driven by the artificial intelligence that that underpins it. So I love your perspective, Cal. I really couldn't agree more, just with what's ahead in the next decade, and it's really exciting.
Absolutely.
And Matt, that's a perfect segue to the partnership between your two companies. We don't often have two guests, but this one made perfect sense because, there is this partnership. And so I'd love to learn a bit more of it, and maybe even, how did it come to be? Because, business is interesting and you see companies do partnerships, here or there, but this seems like a really interesting one just from, the basics that I've heard about it. So I don't know who's appropriate to start with that question, but I'll turn it over to the two of you to kind of talk more about that.
Cal, go ahead.
Absolutely. So, this came about, like, just the history of it was in the fall of last year. I was really trying to observe all of the changes that have happened in the machine learning and AI world. And so it used to be the domain of big and deep tech, right? Big corporations. If you had a data science team, you could build these models and you could build these, business automation applications and tools. Just to break that down, let me give you an example. Let's say you're trying to, you have thousands of pages of very, very specialized product documentation. This is very common when you have complex manufactured products or software implementations where you might need to reference deeply technical content. You might want to be able to query that or search that the way you would Google. Like, hey, how do I find XYZ in this application? Or how do I do this specific thing in Microsoft Word, right? You ask the question in natural language, you get an answer, and it points you to a document and a help resource. What if you could do the same with traditional documents, right? That's that are not indexed by Google. That's a common application. It's a common pain point. In the past, you would have had to have teams of data scientists structuring these documents, extracting them, getting stored in a database. You'd have to spend a lot of time doing feature mapping and engineering on the specific words to get them into a numeric format where then you can then do mathematical operations on them. You'd have teams upon teams building these various different parts. What happened in light of the pandemic is it really accelerated their adoption of AI because a lot of behavior moved digitally, and a lot of more traditional models that weren't based on actual behavior. They were just based on what happened last year and the year before, just broke because those trends were no longer valid or true. And so it really accelerated companies' exploration into the world of AI and machine learning. What happened as a result is the emergence of building blocks. So I no longer need to train a very, very specific model. You have tools like H2O's driverless AI that can run a battery of 100 different models and 100 different combinations, and then tell me, the data scientist, hey, I found these top 3. I have controls and dials. Hey, I want a model that's more accurate. I want a model that I can interrogate a little bit more and actually understand why it's predicting what it's predicting. So we noticed that the world of building models was changing. The world of actually designing and developing machine learning solutions was changing. And we went out on a search to find a partner that could really help us accelerate our work. And of the companies out there that do this sort of stuff, we were enamored with the AI for All mission that is central to H2O. And so, the platform professional services partnership made a world of sense, but more than that, our values are very aligned. We're all about making AI less scary, making it practical, and giving people the tools to be able to interrogate these models and make sure they're really working in the service of humans, not just AI for the sake of AI.
Yeah, that's awesome. Matt, anything to add from your end?
No, I think you really hit the nail on the head, Cal. But I just to underscore, I think what is so special about the partnership from my perspective, not only is, I'm a Cleveland boy, right? But as you said, the synergies between the companies and really what we're trying to do and make a material impact, with the companies that we get to work with. As you said, when we kind of started on this journey in the fall, there were already some overlap with mutual clients in territory that that we saw promise. But I think what I saw with Pandata and some of the niche startup community that he's been engaged with, there was so much untapped potential for H2O, not only to introduce an accelerant into the Pandata practice, but also how we can start to accelerate these early seed stage organizations that are really trying to change the world of healthcare and diabetes research, and being able to partner on those types of opportunities. I really think hits the spirit of that AI for good, and again, just trying to introduce through technology something that's going to fundamentally change the world here in the near future and and beyond. So I think again, what I saw so special. And I remember Cal, we had an event in Cleveland. He kind of asked, why is this so special to you? Or why are you investing so much time? We're just this small, little boutique shop in Cleveland. And I gave him that exact answer. I think it's inspiring to be a part of, that type of movement. And I think just the overlap, and the synergies with the company allows us to really lock arms and do more together. And, that, at the end of the day is what's most important to me.
That's awesome. That's great. And so as a final question before we pivot to kind of the last part of our show, of course, as we've been talking about, the Ohio Tech Summit's coming up. You both will be there. You both, co-presenting sponsors between the two of your companies. But Cal, you're going to be giving what we're calling innovation sprints. So they're like these TED style talks. If for those that haven't seen those before, kind of these. Yours about 15 minutes, kind of introducing a big idea, kind of, showing your work on it, showing your kind of prediction for the future, really highlighting the expertise that, you and the team are doing every day. But yours is titled Designing High Impact AI Solutions. Are you ready to take action? Maybe we don't need the full talk right now. We'll save that for the actual summit. But if you could kind of, give us the preview of that. Like, what is it? Why is that talk passionate for you? And what will people be able to experience and see as you're talking about it at the summit?
So I'm glad that it's just a TED style talk. I got forced to deliver a Pecha Kucha once. And if you don't know what that is exactly 20 slides, 20 seconds a slide, prescriptive format, no text. Yeah. So that was maybe one of the most interesting talks I've ever had to give about AI. That being said, I'm really excited for this session. I am glad that events are coming back in person. I love being able to learn online and virtually, but just being able to absorb in a room, have sidebar conversations, be around people. I'm really excited that things are back. The past few months, I've been kind of going on a tour. All of the big data and AI and machine learning affiliated conferences I could get to. I spent maybe 5 days in Cleveland or in Ohio in all of March. Wow. So I've been trying to absorb. And I'm seeing a pattern emerge, and that's what inspired this talk. I'm noticing that companies that do AI well don't focus on just the automation. They actually build systems that augment expert humans to take action. Not only that, but they also invest outside of the AI in low-tech enablement that actually helps humans take action. And I'll give one teaser or one small example of this. Georgia Tech, they invested in a model maybe 7-8 years ago where they were trying to identify students at risk of dropout. And what they identified 700 different traits. They could predict with a high degree of accuracy this student's not going to make it. Put that aside. They brought in 42 academic advisors at, I think, $1 to $2 million a year total price point to staff them up. And they equipped these advisors with this system. It would help them identify which students were at risk. It would explain why they were at risk. And it helped them actually take action. So they had a tool that was helping humans take action. And they invested in having these humans there, so the capacity to be able to take that action. What ended up happening is over the course of 5 years, they doubled their rate of graduating African-American students in STEM fields. They now have the highest rate of African-American students graduating in STEM fields in the nation, and they've also increased retention across every demographic. And that retention, the tuition dollars, more than paid for the investment in the advisors. And so stories like that, I've been hearing them over and over and over again. You build an AI system, you build it for humans to take action. they take action, you get magic. And so that's kind of the idea of the talk.
I love that. And that's such a perfect like example, again, for people that aren't in your all space, working with artificial intelligence day to day. You identified a problem, you identified the solutions that the technology, allows, but then the human centered, action and impact and then the outcome, of course, which is, what it's all about. So that's incredibly awesome. And I can't wait for your session and to learn more. But we're going to pivot now to the last part, which is actually 4 questions. And we ask all of our guests these. So it's really fun to hear, AI experts from Northeastern Ohio, maybe what a venture capitalist from Cincinnati has to say, or a biotech CEO in Columbus. These are, kind of supposed to be fun. The answers don't have to be short. They can. But really, it's just a fun way to get different perspectives and kind of ideas out there. And so the first question, and we'll go Cal, Matt, and then we'll kind of do a snake draft for our fantasy football fans. So for the next one, Matt, you'll go first, then Cal. But the first one is, Cal, we'll start with you. What is a challenge you're working to solve? And I'll kind of give a little bit kind of more on this. So for some people, the answers are literally what their companies are doing, and they're working to solve these massive things. Others, as business executives, in the middle of this pandemic, as we have had these shows, they could say, "Hey, we're trying to keep our culture intact," as we've all been virtual and pivoting there. So it can be something massive and big that your companies are working on, or something within the day to day as a leader that you are focusing on and isn't maybe, on the front page of a website, although all answers are good. So Cal, we'll start with you.
So I'm really trying to address the issue of inclusion on tech teams, but also more broadly in business communities. It's something that I'm really, really passionate about, especially as an immigrant and someone who's lived a multicultural life. When we talk about AI and its risk of going wrong, right? There are these unintentional biases we bring to the table, whether it's experiences we're not familiar with, whether it's assumptions we don't stop to check. It's very rarely intentional and malicious. And so empowering teams building these AI systems with the right mix of talent, with the right perspectives, that is a deeply important problem. And the composition of the workforce today just isn't what it needs to be. So how do we facilitate difficult and sensitive conversations to really get at building tech that is inclusive, safe, and benefits all? So that's an interesting problem that I'm trying to, I don't know if I'm going to solve it, but it's something that I'm obsessed with.
Yeah. And it's, it's an important one.
Problem.
So, it is a big problem. And those are, they're important ones to go after. So that's great. Matt, how about you?
I guess mine's a little bit different, just with what I'm trying to do with Cal and just kind of this community is really to your point, the in-person meetups are a breath of fresh air and very welcomed right now. And what I'm focused on is not just creating awareness for H2O, but really building a foundation of a community that we can come together, collaborate, share ideas, best practices. I mean, at the heart of the H2O culture is this. We call it a maker culture, and it's really everyone's got this roll up your sleeves and let's solve some big problems together. So I've been with H2O since July of last year, and really again, once we had the opportunity to meet with Pandata folks, I just see so much promise in what we can do here in Ohio and in the greater Cleveland market, and really building these pockets of community, right? And that's what's been really a big piece of my focus as we rolled into 2022, and the lights are coming back on, right, with getting back together. So, and I think it dovetails really well into what you're trying to do with the summit and everything coming up this weekend. So we're super excited to really build some momentum on the backs of that, and and to meet everyone and continue to continue with that mission. So
yeah, and Matt, that's a vital one for Ohio's place and building out
Totally.
this, as Cal, you mentioned, kind of the trends over the past 10 or so years. And I loved your 2 answers were a bit different, but it was inclusion and community, which I think also very much go hand in hand. And so, Matt, we'll go start with you for question 2. So this is a favorite read, listen, or watch. So it can be a book, a podcast, or a show. And again, no right or wrong answers. Doing this over COVID, we've had our fair share of Tiger Kings. We've also had our fair share of like extremely scientific books that I'm not nearly smart enough to even read the back cover summary on. So all answers are good. So favorite book, podcast, or show that you're into now?
Well, I have to admit, I didn't get on the Tiger King craze. So that's
you're probably better
and
for it.
I'd say, I consume a lot of content, through audio. Just I've got 2 little boys. Life is crazy. Travel is ramping back up. So I'm a super big fan of podcasts. I love the long form interview where you have host and guest, and you just have stream of consciousness discussion, and you meander into some really fascinating areas. So one of my favorites is the Tim Ferriss Show. So you really get a cross section of scientists, entrepreneurs. It just runs the gamut, and you just hear so many different perspectives, and tips and tricks and life hacks, and just things that you can kind of start to adopt. And I'll give you kind of a second piece to that answer, still within that vein. But one of the reads that I have here, I don't know if you can see this, Tools for Titans. What I like about this book is it takes all of those podcasts and distills it down into something that's super consumable that you can pick up. You can just blindly open the book, consume something for 2 or 3 minutes and walk away with something that's actually really interesting that you maybe haven't thought of. So, that's kind of my go-to these days, again, with crazy life, with family and everything. But I think there's so much to be learned from other people. And, it's a great source to kind of like funnel that into your brain and kind of make it your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Great answer. Cal, how about you?
So I got asked this the other day, and I realized I'm a deeply boring person when it comes to the books that I read.
Oh, come on, Cal, you're not.
I always pick up the latest edition of the HBR year review with the best 10 articles. But I just finished reading a book that was deeply profound. It might be my new religion. It's called Essentialism. And it's this idea of, the workforce, especially over the past few years, right, has evolved to be constantly on, whether we're there in person or virtual. We're reaching and pushing up against our limitations as humans, right? What does life look like after this? And so this book explores this idea of, what we typically do is we put, a little hairline in 1,000 different directions. How do we focus and understand that we are in fact limited? That's okay. And put our energy into the things where we can have the greatest impact. That really resonated with me.
That's a good one. This is probably, I love all these conversations, but I love asking this question because you always get, something else. And at some point I had to like stop adding to my Amazon wish list just because I can't keep up. But another good one. And Matt, I do like the Tim Ferriss as well, because it's like, and frankly, why I like doing this show and this conversation, because, we get to talk to so many interesting people, and, we don't go quite as long as, some of his marathon shows, but it's really cool when you can kind of get, as you said, like the athlete or the scientist or, the startup, and you just get to talk with really smart people. So both good answers. Cal, will go to start for you for our third one. What is a problem you'd solve or a business you'd start if funding was no issue? So let's take your current day jobs off the table. Think you get $100 million, and this can be a nonprofit. It can be a for-profit. Like, there's no right or wrong answer here, but just a big problem that you would solve that you think the world needs solving. If you got a big old check and you could just go tackle it.
It's a great question. I kind of feel like I would do Pandata bigger.
Okay.
But
no, let's hear it. Yeah, like what would that look like?
So today, there's still a lot of barriers to building machine learning solutions, right? You need to have data science talent. You need to have the tools and technology in place to be able to massage the data, transform it, be able to build these models effectively. So if I were to solve a problem today, I would love to create tools that make it easier to interrogate potential biases or risks in complex data. And I'll qualify that a little bit more, right? When you're talking about building a model that maybe just tries to look at, can I predict if somebody's going to make this purchase or not? Yeah. You have very objective truth. They either purchased it or they didn't, right? Yes or no. You're predicting if somebody's disabled or has a condition. They either have it or they don't. Now, when you're trying to make recommendations, hey, I'm going to try to recommend the next best action to retain this customer. Or I'm going to try to synthesize this entire document into 2 paragraphs. What does objective correct look like, right? If humans were to perform that task equally trained, you're probably going to get slightly different answers. So we have to understand that as AI applications get more complex, what correct looks like is very subjective. Put that aside. Look at underlying data. I can look at credit scores in a table attributed to a person and say, we have a problem here. People from these neighborhoods have lower than average credit scores. We may be biasing our models. Now, what happens when we start ingesting images, right? Is it a home from a lower income neighborhood? Is it a home from, whatever? And there's some really interesting applications where you can scan street satellite imagery to come up with predictions for certain locations. So we're dealing with data at scale where it's harder to inspect our biases. GPT-3, for example, is something most people have heard about by now. It's one of the most powerful content generating or generative algorithms where it can write articles that almost seem indistinguishable from a human. When we start talking about the scale of data on which these models were trained, trillions of documents, billions of documents, how do we know what went into that? Did it observe some articles that were maybe sexist? Did it observe some tones that were historically incorrect or inaccurate? These biases become weights in models that may not say, hey, I'm a biased weight, but it carries that forward. So how do we make it easier for teams to interrogate their data, interrogate their models, and understand, is there a risk here? Is there toxicity here?
That's interesting. Matt, how about you? And as a reminder, it's one big problem: funding, profit, nonprofit, whatever you want to tackle.
Sure. Well, I was going to say I would invest in Pandata too. I mean, obviously, it's near and dear to my heart and changing the world. No, I think, it's a great question. And just kind of stepping out of kind of my H2O suit or my H2O body, I think, a big thing as I reflect on just what everyone's experienced in the last 2.5 years and what we've been through. And I think, putting, dollars to work against, health awareness, mental health, and just like, how to take better care of yourself in the spirit of like, not just healthy living and peak performance as an athlete, but just thinking about longevity and what that means. From again, I said I've got 2 little boys. That's become a really important piece to kind of my daily practice and how I think about things. So that I can be the best version of myself for them. Right. And I just think that, a lot of even Tim Ferriss and just some of the other podcasts that I consume, this becomes a central theme. And, just creating a better engine for personal like health development, conditioning, for, those reasons. Again, not for, I don't need to be a power lifter. Right. But just, that type of, education that I think that there's a massive gap to a majority of the community out there. And I think there's so much opportunity that, technology can introduce there. And there's no shortage of apps for stuff like that. But I just think, more concerted focus around that could be really powerful, a powerful movement to be a part of and make, everyone better. Right.
Yeah. Have you, and kind of piggybacking off of that, and then, the favorite read, listen, or watch, have you read I think it's, what is it? I have it on my Lifespan by David Sinclair. It's on my bookshelf. Have you heard of that one or seen that one?
I've heard of it, but I haven't. I've not gotten to it yet.
Really interesting, and actually a good shout out to Scott Allen of John Carroll, who is the leading from the co-host side of at the Tech Summit. I believe he actually had Dr. Sinclair, who's a researcher at Harvard University, speak to a class or something he did. And so he had mentioned it to me, but it's really interesting. It's a great book, Lifespan, Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to. But he also, so this is probably a couple years old at this point, but he recently just did a podcast series. So you can kind of digest it now in podcast form with, some kind of updates and all of that. So that's an interesting one, especially Matt, if you're kind of into that space, I'd check it out.
It's a great recommendation. Just so the listeners know, we did not prep that. There was not teed up for Chris to give that plug. So but it's great. It just happened organically, I swear.
Just perfect. Okay, so fourth, final one, just a fun one. Favorite place in Ohio. So again, it can be what you're looking forward to on the weekend with family, or if you have people flying in, from across the country to have a business meeting, where you're taking them. So you can kind of take it in any way you want to, but your favorite place in Ohio.
Is it we're throwing to me?
Yeah. Let's go, Matt. Yep.
Okay. I'd say my favorite, the place that has the most special place in my heart is, I'm an East Sider, is Chagrin Falls. I don't know if you've been, Chris, if you've had the opportunity. I know you're in Columbus, but it's got a special place in my heart. It's not only is it just like a really charming kind of picturesque community with a ice cream and a popcorn shop that overlooks the falls, but it's a place that me and my family will go and we'll take the little boys, we'll go feed the ducks over the falls, and it's just we've got a lot of memories there, and have for years. It's where I proposed to my wife, and I just think it's it just is a very special a special place in Ohio that anyone that gets to visit the greater Cleveland area, do yourself a favor. It's you won't be disappointed.
Yeah, it's amazing, and that's actually a fairly again, talking to people across the state, that has come up more than once. And if anyone is looking for a nice spring road trip or something in state, that's one to add to the list. How about you, Cal?
So for those of you who can't see the video, this is my favorite mug. It's from the Cleveland Museum of Art. I never get tired of this place. It is my single favorite gem in Ohio, and I brag about it wherever I travel. Fun fact, it is the second best art museum in the country, second only to the Met in New York City. We've got such a great gem right here in our backyard. Beautiful building. I especially love it during the summertime and when they have their Friday mix events. So you get to enjoy seeing the art pieces, but it's also a social place to get together with friends and be a part of the community here in Cleveland. So hands down, my favorite gem.
And that's one that I still have on my to-do list. So we've had one that I've enjoyed and love, and one that, again, I've heard others mention that. So I definitely got to get up there, especially apparently summer's the time to go. But
so for those of us joining the Ohio X Summit this Saturday, make plans to stop by the Museum of Art on Sunday. They're open.
There we go. And hey, maybe at some point we can do a social tech social there or something like that to kind of get everyone together. But
we can absolutely set that up.
Perfect. I like where your head's at, Chris. I like where your head's at.
So Matt, Cal, thank you so much. Thanks for all you're doing to build tech in Ohio, especially, in an exciting new space like artificial intelligence. Really fun conversation, and this has been really enjoyable. So I guess as a final opportunity, and we'll go Matt and then Cal second. Anything you want to plug, your websites, follow you on LinkedIn, whatever it is, kind of a final parting comment for each of you. So Matt, we'll go with you first.
It's H2O AI. I mean, it's check out the website. We're doing a lot of really fantastic things, really pushing the envelope of artificial intelligence and machine learning. You're going to see a lot more at the summit. So please don't be shy. Come and meet us. We love sharing ideas, hearing what you're working on, hearing how we can help. So H2O.ai. Check it out.
Great, perfect. Thanks, Matt. Cal.
So check us out on LinkedIn and our website, pandata.co. Big teaser, we've got some great things brewing between Pandata and H2O, and we're working on a very unique offering that's going to be exclusive to middle market and startup companies to really make it easier to get into designing and building machine learning and AI solutions. Final plug for us, we produce this monthly digest called Voices of Trusted AI. If you are feeling just as left in the dust as I am about trying to keep up with all the changes in regulations or the ways in which AI can go wrong, give it a subscribe. We do kind of like a morning brew format, really short read once a month, most relevant trends happening in the space.
Very cool. Well, perfect way to end. Again, thank you both for all you're doing. Looking forward to learning more over time. I know both this weekend coming up, but in the future, it sounds like some exciting stuff coming from both companies. But we'll link in the show comments, the websites, the LinkedIn's, and all of that, so folks can just scroll on down, learn more, and connect with them. But again, thanks both for joining Built in Ohio. Another great episode. And again, this is on the YouTube players. It's also on, or I'm sorry, the podcast players plus YouTube. And for those listening, if you can always, give it a 5-star review and give it a rating, that helps more people discover conversations like this and leaders like the two we have joining us today. So thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great day. We'll talk to you all soon. And thanks for being here, Cal and Matt. We appreciate it. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.